The scream hit me before I even saw her. "That's my son's inheritance." Her voice cut through the mountain air like a chainsaw. I killed my engine, silence falling heavy around us. For a moment, all I could hear was the whisper of wind through the pines and the faint crackle of sawdust settling on the porch I'd been restoring. Then came the crunch of tires on gravel. White Mercedes, spotless even after a 10-mile dirt road. Out stepped a woman in her 50s, dressed in designer denim and fury. Blonde highlights framed a face that looked like it hadn't heard the word no in years. "Stop!" she barked again, striding toward me with the kind of confidence you only see in people used to getting their way. "You can't touch that cabin. It belongs to the Thornwick family." I rested my chainsaw against the stump, trying to figure out if this was a prank or just small-town theater. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "I bought this place at auction. Legally." "Got the deed right inside," she laughed, a high, bitter sound. "Oh, please." "Some courthouse paperwork doesn't erase generations of history. My son Bradley is the rightful heir to this land." The smell of fresh-cut pine mixed with her expensive perfume, sharp, floral, and entirely out of place among the sawdust and dirt. I studied her. Perfect manicure, spotless shoes, posture of someone who believed the world revolved around her driveway. I'd met plenty like her back when I worked in construction, people who thought money made them invincible. "Well," I said, "if that's the case, you can take it up with the county office. Until then, I've got beams to replace." Her eyes flashed. "You'll regret this. We have standards here, community standards, community standards." The phrase dripped out of her mouth like poison. She spun on her heel, stalked back to her Mercedes, and sped off in a cloud of dust. I didn't know it yet, but that was the start of the longest, strangest battle of my life. 6 months earlier, my life had been in pieces. Divorce finalized, savings drained, house sold to cover lawyer fees. 20 years of marriage gone in a haze of paperwork and quiet bitterness. I'd spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how a life could collapse so completely. Then one night, sometime after midnight, I stumbled across a county auction listing. 1873 log cabin estate, 15 acres, Millbrook Valley. The photos showed a weathered cabin, roof sagging, porch half rotted, but the bones were beautiful. Hand-hewn logs, stone foundation, the kind of craftsmanship that laughed in the face of time. I could almost smell the history through the screen. My grandfather used to say, "Work with your hands and you'll never starve." Maybe that was what I needed, to build something again. The bidding started low, just a few curious locals. When the gavel fell at $47,000, I could hardly believe it. My heart raced. My cabin. My fresh start. Driving out to Millbrook Valley felt like stepping into another century. Rolling hills, split-rail fences, the occasional farmhouse standing proud against the horizon. But as I reached the edge of town, the scenery changed. New developments, manicured lawns, and houses that all looked suspiciously identical. The kind of place where HOAs ruled like royalty. My property sat just beyond their reach, or so I thought. A dirt road wound through pine forest until the trees opened to reveal the cabin. It leaned slightly, windows clouded with age, porch boards sagging like tired shoulders. But to me it was perfect. I stood there, breathing in the scent of old timber and damp earth, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. That peace lasted 3 days. The first visit from Delilah Thornwick came on a Tuesday morning. I was mid-swing with a hammer when a white Escalade crunched up the drive, the kind of vehicle that cost more than my entire renovation budget. Out stepped the same woman from the later confrontation, the HOA president herself, though I didn't know that yet. "Excuse me?" she called, voice sweet but sharp. "I'm Delilah Thornwick, president of the Millbrook Estates Homeowners Association. My husband runs Thornwick Construction. You've probably heard of us." I hadn't, but I nodded anyway. "This property," she continued, gesturing with manicured fingers, "has always been part of the Thornwick family's sphere of influence. My son had an understanding with the previous owner." "An understanding?" I asked. She smiled, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "A gentleman's agreement. He was set to inherit it." "Then I guess the gentleman forgot to tell the county," I said, holding up my deed. "They auctioned it fair and square." The smile vanished. That auction was premature. This land isn't meant for outsiders. We maintain certain expectations here. Her gaze flicked down to my work boots, my sweat-stained shirt. People who belong. That word, belong, hung in the air like smoke. I'd heard it before. It always meant the same thing. You're not one of us. I stepped closer, careful to keep my tone level. I bought this place legally, ma'am. I'm fixing it up, not tearing it down. If you've got an issue, file it with the county. She didn't like that. Her lips tightened into a line thin as fishing wire. We'll see about that, she said, tapping something into her phone before striding back to her car. The Escalade roared away, leaving the smell of exhaust and entitlement behind. I watched her go, that uneasy knot forming in my gut. Something told me this wasn't over. 2 days later, I got a call from the county building department. Mr. Holloway, a nervous voice said, your renovation permits appear to be missing. Missing? I repeated. They were approved last week. I'm so sorry, the clerk murmured. The files were deleted during a system update. You'll have to reapply. It felt like someone had kicked the legs out from under me. Reapplying meant weeks of delays and lost income. I drove to the county office, but the staff avoided my eyes. One woman whispered that my application had been flagged for review. By Friday, an inspector showed up unannounced. Clipboard, sunglasses. That slow, deliberate walk of someone who enjoys finding problems. He circled my property, muttering about unauthorized work and heritage compliance. Then he handed me a citation, $2,300 in fines, effective immediately. I could almost hear Delilah laughing from wherever she was. That weekend, I worked in silence. Each swing of my hammer echoed through the valley like defiance. I wasn't going anywhere. Sunday morning, I drove into town for supplies. That's when I learned how small Millbrook Valley really was. The cashier at the hardware store looked nervous, ringing me up. You're the guy fixing the Henderson place, right? He asked. Yeah, I said carefully. He hesitated. Word is Mrs. Thornwick isn't happy about it. Says it's her family's legacy. I forced a laugh. Guess she forgot to pay the property taxes for 50 years. He didn't laugh back. By Monday, things got worse. Someone left a note under my truck wiper. Outsiders don't last here. No signature. Just that chilling handwriting, perfect cursive, like from an old etiquette book. I stood there in the morning mist, note trembling in my hand, the forest eerily quiet around me. I thought about my ex-wife, my lost house, the nights I'd promised myself I'd never back down again. Maybe this was my test. That night, I installed cameras around the cabin. Motion lights. Locked the gates. I wasn't paranoid, but I wasn't naive either. The next day, as I was hauling lumber, the sound of gravel tires returned. Her again. Only this time she brought backup, a man in a tailored suit and mirrored sunglasses. Mr. Holloway, she said sweetly. This is Mr. Pearson, our HOA compliance attorney. Good for him, I said. He cleared his throat. We're here to inform you that your current modifications violate Millbrook Valley Historical Preservation Standards. You are required to cease construction until approved by the HOA Architectural Committee. I couldn't help but grin. Funny thing, I'm not in your HOA. Delilah's smile faltered. All of Millbrook Valley falls under our jurisdiction. No, ma'am, I said, holding up my deed again. This property line ends where your development begins. Her attorney shifted uncomfortably. Delilah glared at him, then back at me. We'll see about that. She turned and walked away, heels clicking against the stone path like a metronome counting down to trouble. As her car disappeared down the road, I looked back at my cabin, the cracked logs, the sagging porch, the smell of earth and pine and rain. She saw an eyesore. I saw a second chance. That night I sat by the wood stove, the firelight flickering across my grandfather's old tools. His words echoed in my head. Build something that matters. Outside, the forest whispered. The wind carried a sound I couldn't quite name, half sigh, half warning. Somewhere in the darkness, I imagined Delilah plotting her next move. She thought she could scare me off. She thought money and influence could erase a man's resolve. She was wrong, because this wasn't just a cabin anymore. It was a battle line, and I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke to the hiss of tires on gravel and the metallic rattle of a truck tailgate. My first thought was delivery, but the pit in my stomach already knew better. Through the window, I saw a county vehicle parked crooked across my drive. A man in an orange vest was planting a red "Stop Work Order" sign right beside my mailbox like he was staking a claim. "Morning," I said, stepping out, coffee in hand. He didn't meet my eyes. "New directive from the building department. Heritage review pending? Heritage review?" I repeated. "This cabin's been here longer than electricity." "Talk to your HOA," he muttered, sliding into his truck. Gravel sprayed as he left. I stood staring at that red notice, bright against the weathered logs. It felt like a warning flare fired straight into my peace. For 2 weeks, I fought paper. Permits, appeals, inspections, each form thicker and more confusing than the last. Every call ended with polite apologies and no progress. And every night, the same white SUV crept past my property line, headlights off, moving slow enough to let the cameras catch only a blur. When I finally cornered Janet, "The clerk from the county office?" She whispered the truth over the phone like it was contraband. "Delilah's husband has friends in the department. They're flagging your file." I almost laughed. Friends. Of course. In places like Millbrook Valley, power wasn't official. It was inherited. That night, I drove into town to the only place where gossip traveled faster than Wi-Fi. Bob's Hardware. The smell of motor oil and cedar dust hit me the moment I stepped inside. Bob himself, a broad-shouldered man with permanent grease on his knuckles, looked up from the counter. "You're Holloway," he said quietly. "Heard you stirred up the Queen." "Queen?" "Delilah Thornwick. Around here, she runs the HOA, the zoning board, and half the county office. If you're breathing within 5 miles of her property line, she thinks you need permission." I told him about the stop work order, the fines, the vanishing permits. He listened, jaw tightening. "You're not the first. Last year, a young couple tried opening a bed and breakfast down the road. Same game. Permits lost. Inspectors every week. They gave up. What happens if I don't give up?" He grinned, teeth flashing beneath his beard. "Then you'll need friends who aren't scared of her." He handed me a business card, edges smudged with grease. Eleanor Vasquez, attorney at law. Above Bob's Hardware. Eleanor was nothing like I expected. 70s, silver hair in a tight bun, eyes sharper than drill bits. Her office smelled of lemon polish and stubbornness. "Grandfathered property?" she said, scanning my deed through thin glasses. "Built 1873? That's older than the zoning code itself. So they can't touch me?" "Oh, they can try," she said, scribbling notes. "But the law's on your side if you can prove continuous structure history. Get me photos, any records, even the original nails if you can dig them up." Her confidence steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe the Valley's bullies weren't invincible. The next day, I started cataloging everything. Dates, names, photos of the stop work sign, even Delilah's SUV license plate. If this was going to be a war, I'd need evidence sharper than her manicure. October rolled in with the smell of wood smoke and trouble. I was repairing the back wall when a flash caught my eye. Camera flash. Delilah stood at the edge of my property, photographing the cabin like she was building a case file. "Beautiful evening," she called sweetly. "Just documenting some maintenance concerns." "Mrs. Thornwick," I said, pulling out my phone to record. "You're trespassing." "Oh, nonsense. Everything in Millbrook Valley affects our community." She smiled. Click, 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 each flash popping like gunfire. "Wouldn't want undesirable elements ruining property values." That word again. Undesirable. "Funny," I said. "From where I'm standing, the only thing ruining value is harassment." Her smile froze. "Careful, Mr. Holloway. The fire department takes safety violations very seriously, especially after anonymous tips." She left, leaving the faint perfume of threat behind. That night, the fire department did show up. Anonymous complaint about open flames. My campfire was stone-ringed and legal, but the chief still issued a warning. I started realizing this wasn't random. It was coordinated pressure. Bureaucratic warfare with manicured hands pulling the strings. 3 days later, Eleanor called. "I've been digging," she said. "Your property predates HOA incorporation by 90 years. They have no jurisdiction. Tell that to the inspectors." "Oh, I plan to." Her tone carried the satisfaction of someone who sharpened arguments for sport. "But Marcus, something's off. The Thornwicks have manipulated land boundaries before. If I were you, I'd look for historical records. Anything that proves where your property truly begins. Historical records." That meant one place, the county archives. The basement of the Millbrook Courthouse smelled like old paper and mildew. Rows of dusty ledgers stretched into darkness. For hours, I turned brittle pages until my fingers blackened with ink dust. And then, in an 1890 ledger, I found a map. Faded lines, handwritten notes, the Thornwick estate marked neatly south of the creek. My cabin sat north, clearly outside their claim. Proof. But fate wasn't done throwing curveballs. While pulling up a warped floorboard back at the cabin, my crowbar hit something hollow. I pried deeper, an old stone cavity sealed with mortar. Inside lay a leather-wrapped bundle, dry and stiff with age. My pulse kicked, I unwrapped it carefully. Inside were 3 documents bound with brittle twine. The first, Territorial Land Grant, 1873, embossed with a wax seal signed by the governor of the territory. The name jumped off the page, Ezekiel Holloway, my great-great-grandfather. The second was a hand-drawn survey map of the entire valley, detailing 50 acres of granted land. My 15-acre auction purchase covered only a fraction. And the third, a letter written in old-fashioned script. To my descendants, should any man challenge our claim, present this document. This land is Holloway ground in perpetuity. For a full minute, I just stared. Generations of dust and silence had guarded a secret that could upend everything. I called Eleanor. My voice shook. "You need to see this." She arrived with a historian from the State Society, Dr. Patricia Morse, a woman who handled the bundle like a newborn. Under UV light, she murmured, "Paper stock, ink age, seal composition, everything checks. These are authentic territorial records." Eleanor exhaled slowly. "Marcus, this doesn't just prove ownership of your 15 acres. It invalidates most of the Thornwick development. They've been building on Holloway land." I sat back, heart hammering. Half the valley, the entire empire Delilah bragged about, was sitting on property that, by law, belonged to my family. The following morning, I found fresh tire tracks by my fence line. My security cameras caught headlights sweeping across the trees around midnight. Someone had been prowling again. I wasn't intimidated anymore. I was calculating. Eleanor suggested patience. Authenticate first, strike later. But part of me wanted to march straight into Delilah's marble-floored kitchen and drop the land grant on her table. Instead, I gathered allies. Bob offered his pickup and his quiet loyalty. Martha Caldwell, the retired teacher who'd always butted heads with the HOA, volunteered to help organize documents. Even Chief Rita Gonzalez from the local police paid me a discreet visit. "I've been getting pressure to investigate you," she admitted, eyes weary. "Noise complaints, environmental hazards, none of it checks out. I know harassment when I see it. Then why not shut it down?" She sighed. "Because every complaint comes from someone with influence. But if you've got proof, real proof, we can bring in the state." "Chief," I said, sliding the copies of the grant across the table, "I've got something better than proof. I've got history." That week blurred into controlled chaos. Dr. Morse worked day and night analyzing ink samples and verifying signatures. Eleanor filed preliminary claims with the state court to freeze any new construction by Thornwick Construction pending ownership review. Delilah responded the only way she knew how: aggression. By Thursday, my water pressure dropped to a trickle, main repairs conveniently happening along my boundary. Friday morning, 3 suppliers called to cancel deliveries, each citing community relationships. Saturday night, a drone buzzed above my cabin, filming through windows. It would have been funny if it weren't so desperate. I installed stronger lights and an extra camera pointing straight at the road. That same evening, I caught Bradley Thornwick, Delilah's son, creeping near my fence with a flashlight and a camera. He froze when the motion light exploded above him. "Evening," I called. "Research project?" He bolted, tripping over roots, scrambling into his BMW. The camera he dropped recorded 30 minutes of shaky footage, none flattering. Eleanor smiled when I showed her. Good. Let them dig their own graves. Sunday, we met at my kitchen table. Me, Eleanor, Dr. Morse, Bob, Martha, and Chief Gonzalez. Papers covered every inch, maps, legal codes, photographs. The air smelled of coffee and determination. Dr. Morse set down her magnifier. Authentication complete. Territorial seal verified, ink composition period accurate. This land grant supersedes any subsequent claim. Legally, Mr. Holloway owns 50 acres of Millbrook Valley. Bob let out a low whistle. 50 acres? That's half the town, Martha grinned. Guess Karma's finally paying its property taxes. Eleanor leaned back, eyes glinting. Phase 1, file a quiet title action to re-establish ownership boundaries. Phase 2, coordinate with the district attorney for a corruption probe. Phase 3, inform the HOA that their kingdom just evaporated. I nodded slowly, letting it sink in. For months I'd been on defense. Now, for the first time, I held the high ground. Outside, dusk settled over the valley. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of rain and change. Tomorrow, the fight would leave my driveway and march straight into courtrooms and council halls. Delilah Thornwick thought she'd inherited power. She was about to learn what it meant to inherit justice. The morning of the hearing dawned silver and quiet. Mist clung to the valley like breath on glass, and my reflection in the truck window looked like a man who'd lived 3 lifetimes since this started. The old cabin stood behind me, windows gleaming with the faint reflection of sunrise. No longer tired, no longer half-rotted, reborn, just like me. Eleanor had been up since dawn, already pacing my kitchen by the time I walked in. Her hair was pinned tight, her suit pressed, her calm like steel wrapped in silk. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," she smiled. Good, because Delilah's bringing her entire entourage. That didn't surprise me. For people like Delilah Thornwick, image was everything. She'd built her empire on fear, on glossy perfection and country club charm. But beneath the pearls and manicured lawns was rot, the kind that spreads quietly until sunlight finds it. And today, sunlight was coming. We arrived at the Millbrook County Hall to find the parking lot overflowing. Local reporters, neighbors, even contractors Delilah's company had underpaid over the years. Everyone had shown up. The air buzzed with curiosity. Bob waved from near the door, Martha beside him holding a thermos the size of her arm. "Whole town's here," Bob muttered as we walked past. "Feels like Sunday service, if the sermon was about karma." Inside, the atmosphere shifted. Cool marble floors, echoing voices, the faint click of heels. At the front of the chamber stood Delilah Thornwick herself, surrounded by lawyers in tailored suits. Her son Bradley sat beside her, arms crossed, jaw tight. When she saw me, her smile sharpened. "Well," she said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up, "if it isn't the squatter of the century." I took my seat beside Eleanor, keeping my voice steady. "Careful, Delilah. Words like that can get expensive." The crowd chuckled. A flicker of irritation crossed her face before she turned toward the dais, where Commissioner Harlan banged his gavel. "This hearing will address the boundary dispute between Mr. Marcus Holloway and the Millbrook Estates Homeowners Association, represented by Mrs. Delilah Thornwick." Eleanor rose first. "Your Honor, this isn't simply a dispute. This is a matter of historical record, one that reaches back 150 years. We intend to show that the land upon which the Thornwick developments sit was granted to the Holloway family in 1873, long before any HOA existed." A ripple ran through the crowd. Delilah's lawyer stood, slick and practiced. "Objection. These so-called documents are unverified relics with no modern legal standing." Eleanor smiled faintly, the smile of a chess master about to take a queen. "Then you'll be pleased to know we brought an expert." She motioned to the back. Dr. Patricia Moore stepped forward, carrying a reinforced case. Inside, wrapped in archival cloth, lay the weathered land grant and the letter I'd found beneath the cabin floorboards. When she placed them under the overhead projector, the room fell silent. The seal gleamed faintly under the light, crimson wax. The governor's insignia pressed deep. Dr. Morse spoke with the calm precision of someone who had spent her life defending truth from dust and doubt. This document predates the HOA by nearly a century. The ink composition, paper fiber, and territorial stamp are all period accurate. It is beyond question authentic. The commissioner leaned forward. And the name? Holloway, she said simply. Ezekiel Holloway, great-great-grandfather of the petitioner. The room erupted. Murmurs, camera shutters, whispers. Delilah's composure cracked just slightly. Her lawyer tried to interject, but Eleanor raised a hand. We're not finished. Accompanying the grant is this survey map, also authenticated, delineating 50 acres of Holloway land, including the parcels now developed as Millbrook Estates. The commissioner's brow furrowed. You're saying these modern homes sit on Holloway land? Yes, sir. Which means any HOA claims are void. Delilah shot to her feet. This is ridiculous, she shouted. My family has lived here for generations. My husband built these homes. My son was trespassing. Eleanor cut in smoothly. We have footage of him entering Mr. Holloway's property without permission. Laughter rippled across the room. Delilah's face flushed crimson. The commissioner rapped the gavel. Order! I stayed silent, watching her unravel. Every threat, every fine, every sleepless night flashed through my memory like a reel of bad film. But there was no satisfaction in her humiliation, only clarity. People like Delilah didn't destroy others because they were powerful. They did it because they were afraid of losing control. The hearing dragged on for hours. Delilah's lawyers tried everything. Technicalities, jurisdiction claims, emotional appeals about heritage. But Eleanor met every point with calm precision and hard evidence. Dr. Morse's report. County boundary maps. The original survey coordinates. By late afternoon, the outcome was inevitable. The commissioner leaned back, fingers steepled. Based on the evidence presented, this court recognizes the original Holloway land grant as valid and legally binding. Ownership of the contested parcels reverts to Mr. Marcus Holloway. All HOA restrictions, fines, and citations are hereby nullified. The chamber exploded in noise. Reporters rushing forward, neighbors whispering, cameras flashing. I barely heard it. My hands were gripping the edge of the table, knuckles white, heart hammering in disbelief. It was over. Eleanor turned, her calm breaking into a proud smile. Congratulations, Marcus. You just made history. Delilah stood frozen, eyes wide, lips trembling. Bradley mumbled something under his breath, but she didn't respond. For the first time, she looked small, not in stature, but in certainty. The gavel came down one final time. Court adjourned. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. The crowd spilled out of the courthouse, voices blending into laughter and camera chatter. Bob slapped my shoulder. Guess the old cabin won't need a permit to exist anymore, huh? I laughed for the first time in weeks. Guess not. Martha handed me a folded newspaper already printed with the headline, HOA exposed in land scandal. Beneath it, a photo of Delilah mid-yell, mouth open, finger pointed, fury immortalized. Chief Gonzalez approached quietly. We've already opened investigations into the HOA's financials. Turns out those community improvement fees funded some interesting personal expenses. Meaning? Meaning, she said with a knowing smile, Delilah's going to have plenty of time to think about boundaries, from inside a courtroom. I nodded, not out of revenge, but relief. Justice didn't need shouting. Sometimes it just needed truth to speak louder than money. Weeks passed. The story spread beyond Millbrook. People started driving out to see the cabin that beat the HOA. Some left notes on my gate, stories of their own battles with power, with bullies, with people who thought ownership equaled authority. I read everyone. With the legal chaos behind me, I poured myself into the restoration. Each nail, each plank, each polished beam felt like stitching together something sacred. The porch gleamed, the roof stood proud. And for the first time, the cabin didn't look haunted by history. It looked alive with it. Eleanor visited one afternoon, leaning on her cane as I showed her the finished work. "You know," she said softly, "when I started practicing law, I thought justice was about punishment. But watching you fight, I think it's more about restoration." "Of the cabin?" I asked. "Of yourself." She smiled, that rare, quiet smile of someone who'd seen too many endings and was glad this one found peace. The valley changed after that. Without Delilah's grip, neighbors started talking again. Real conversations, not the filtered politeness of HOA meetings. The Thornwick mansion went up for sale. Rumor said Delilah moved to another state, somewhere with fewer memories and fewer microphones. One morning, I hiked up the ridge above my land, where the original Holloway survey line met the horizon. The sun broke over the valley, painting the rooftops gold. From up there, I could see it all: the creek, the forest, the cabin standing proud in the middle like a heartbeat that refused to stop. I thought of my grandfather's words again. Build something that matters. Turns out, he didn't mean just with wood and nails. 6 months later, the State Historical Board officially recognized the property as the Holloway Heritage Cabin, protected by law. School trips came through. Local kids learned how the land had been built, lost, and reclaimed. Sometimes they asked me what it felt like to win. "It's not about winning," I'd tell them. "It's about holding on when you're told to let go." One evening, as twilight spilled across the trees, I found myself on the porch, same spot where it all began. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying echoes of the past. Hammer strikes, laughter, maybe even the whisper of those who came before. I raised my glass of iced tea toward the horizon. "We're home again," I murmured. In the distance, the lights of the town flickered on, small and steady. The fight was over. The land was safe. The story was complete. But sometimes, when the night settled just right, I could almost hear her voice again, not angry, not entitled, just distant, fading into the forest's quiet hum. "That's my son's inheritance." And I'd smile, shaking my head. "No, Delilah, it never was."